I had always dreamed of starting my own business, but I never knew how. For years, I worked in a corporate job that, while stable, didn't give me any excitement. Every morning, I sat at my desk, staring at a computer screen, feeling like I was wasting my time. I knew there had to be more to life than sitting in a cubicle all day. My story begins in a small apartment, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to make ends meet. I had a good salary, but I was never able to save much. Every month, I'd pay rent, buy groceries, and that was about it. I didn't have the luxury of extra money for luxuries or even investments. One day, while scrolling through social media, I saw an ad for a business opportunity that promised to help you start an online store and make passive income. I was skeptical at first, but it was one of those late-night scrolling sessions where you just click on anything. The ad led me to a free webinar, and against my better judgment, I decided to watch it. The webinar was about dropshipping. The presenter went on and on about how easy it was to start, how you didn't need much upfront investment, and how people were making six figures a year working from their laptops. I wasn't completely sold, but there was something about it that felt different from anything I had seen before. The idea of working from anywhere, being my own boss, and controlling my income was incredibly appealing. After the webinar, I was left with a ton of questions, but I was also curious. I did some research, and while I didn't find glowing reviews, I found enough people who had succeeded to convince me to take the leap. I scraped together a little savings from my paycheck and invested in a basic online course on how to start a dropshipping business. The first thing I learned was how much work went into it. I spent countless hours setting up my store, picking products, creating a website, and figuring out the best way to market my store. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt completely lost. I didn't know what I was doing, and I had no idea if this was going to work. But I kept pushing through. I made my first sale after 3 weeks of launching. It wasn't much, just a $20 product, but I was thrilled. I thought, if I can sell one thing, I can sell more. It was a small victory, but it gave me the confidence to keep going. Over the next few months, I started tweaking my website, learning about Facebook ads, and experimenting with different marketing strategies. Slowly, sales began to trickle in. But just as I was starting to feel good about my progress, I hit a major obstacle. One of my suppliers suddenly went out of business, and I had to scramble to find a replacement. My customers were angry because their orders were delayed, and I had to issue several refunds. I felt like a failure. I spent hours trying to fix the problem, but it seemed like I couldn't catch a break. I almost gave up. I thought about going back to my regular job and forgetting about the business. But something in me refused to quit. I was determined to make this work, no matter how hard it was. I learned from my mistakes, adjusted my suppliers, and improved my communication with customers. After a year of struggle, things finally started to click. My sales grew steadily, and I was able to hire a virtual assistant to help with customer service and order fulfillment. The business was becoming a real source of income. It wasn't a huge income, but it was enough to support myself and give me a little extra freedom. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A well-known influencer in the niche I was selling to shared my product on their Instagram account. Overnight, I saw a massive spike in traffic and sales. It felt like everything I had been working for finally came to fruition. With that newfound attention, I reinvested my profits into scaling my business. I expanded my product line, improved my website, and hired more staff to help with customer service. The business grew faster than I could have ever imagined. By the end of my second year, I was making enough money to quit my corporate job. It was the scariest decision I had ever made, but it was also the most liberating. I remember walking into my boss's office to hand in my resignation. I had no idea what my future held, but I was finally in control. Fast forward to today, and I've turned that little online store into a full-fledged e-commerce brand. I have a team of 15 employees, a solid customer base, and a reputation for delivering high-quality products. The best part? I get to work from anywhere in the world. I've traveled to several countries, and as long as I have my laptop, I can run my business. The journey hasn't been easy. There were countless late nights, unexpected setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. Starting that online store was the best decision I ever made, and it changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. There were so many times I wanted to quit, but I pushed through because I believed in the vision I had for my life. Now, I get to wake up every day excited about what I do. I'm not tied to a desk or a 9-to-5 job. I'm my own boss, and I get to make the decisions that shape my future. If you're thinking about starting a business, don't wait for the perfect moment, because it will never come. Start small, keep learning, and keep pushing forward. I may not have all the answers, but I know one thing for sure: if I can do it, so can you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I've always had a passion for business, but it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I realized how much I loved the idea of building something from nothing. I was never the type to have a steady 9-to-5 job, and honestly, I was terrible at taking orders. The entrepreneurial bug bit me early, but it took me years to truly figure out what I wanted to do with it. I started my journey as most do, without much direction. I was working in a corporate job, handling marketing for a small tech company, when I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. I had no clue what the first step should be, so I just dove in and tried everything. I dabbled in various side projects. Some were successful, but most were colossal failures. There were the online stores I tried to build, the failed social media marketing agency, the random business ideas that never even made it past the sketching phase. But all of that was part of the learning process. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. At the time, I was broke. Scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck, but I had big dreams. I told myself every day that I had to figure this out, or I'd end up stuck in the cycle of working for someone else for the rest of my life. I couldn't stomach the thought of that. Every night, I stayed up late researching, learning, trying to improve myself and my skills. Slowly but surely, the pieces started to come together. I finally decided to focus on one thing I had been passionate about for years: fitness. I had always loved working out, and I knew a lot about it. I figured there had to be a way to combine my passion for fitness with my drive to run a business. I started with a simple Instagram account. I had no followers, no marketing budget, just a phone and a willingness to learn. I began posting fitness tips, routines, and transformation stories. I was honest about my journey, including the failures, the struggles, and the setbacks. Slowly, people started noticing. At first, it was just a handful of likes from friends and family, but then something clicked. People liked the authenticity of what I was posting. They didn't want the perfect body. They wanted real results, real advice, and real stories. As my following grew, so did my confidence. I started to develop a community of people who were genuinely interested in fitness, and that's when I realized I had a potential business on my hands. I took the next step and started offering personalized fitness coaching services. I didn't have any official certifications at the time, but I had a deep understanding of fitness, and I was committed to helping others achieve their goals. I began offering one-on-one sessions, creating workout plans, and answering fitness-related questions. I charged a modest fee, but the results I was able to get from my clients were incredible. Word spread fast, and before long, I had more clients than I could handle. By this point, I was working full-time on my business, but it was still a grind. I was balancing client calls, content creation, marketing, and trying to figure out the logistics of running a business. I remember many sleepless nights, stressing over invoices and wondering if I was doing everything right. There were days I wanted to quit, but something kept pushing me forward. The breakthrough moment came when I decided to scale. I didn't just want to be a one-person operation anymore. I wanted to create a brand. I began investing in my business, hiring a small team to help with marketing, website design, and administrative tasks. I was still hands-on with the coaching, but I needed help to keep things moving. This is where things really started to take off. With a team in place, I was able to focus on growing the business and improving the services I offered. I began creating online courses, developing fitness products like resistance bands and supplements, and offering group coaching programs. I also started leveraging partnerships with other fitness influencers, which helped expose my brand to a wider audience. It was around this time that I started to see significant financial growth. The money I was making wasn't just coming from one source, it was coming from multiple streams. That's when it hit me. I had created something real. I wasn't just another side hustle anymore. I had built a legitimate business. But with success came new challenges. As my brand grew, so did the pressure. I had to constantly stay ahead of the competition, innovate, and ensure that my customers were happy. I had learned a lot in the past few years, but there were still a lot of things I didn't know. Scaling a business isn't easy, and there were many moments when I felt like I was in over my head. But every time I stumbled, I got back up and figured it out. One of the hardest lessons I learned during this time was the importance of delegation. I couldn't do everything myself, no matter how much I wanted to. I had to learn to trust my team and give them the space to do their jobs. This was a big shift for me, as I had always been the type of person who wanted to control every detail. But stepping back and letting others take ownership of different aspects of the business was what allowed us to grow exponentially. Fast forward to today, and my fitness brand is a multi-million-dollar business. I've got a team of dedicated employees, loyal customers, and a brand that I'm incredibly proud of. It wasn't an easy road to get here, and it's still not always smooth sailing. But I've learned to embrace the challenges, because they are what have shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. I'll never forget where I came from. I was once the guy working at a desk, dreaming of building a business. Now, I'm living that dream. The key to my success has been persistence, learning from my mistakes, and staying true to what I believe in. If there's one piece of advice I can give to aspiring entrepreneurs, it's this: don't give up. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. But if you keep pushing forward, keep learning, and keep improving, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. The journey is tough, but it's worth it. Believe in yourself, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it, because you absolutely can. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It wasn't unusual for people to stay in the same place their whole lives, never venturing far from their families, homes, and routines. My parents, both hardworking and humble, had dreams like anyone else but never really acted on them. They were content with their steady jobs, small house, and predictable life. They never pressured me to do anything but get a good education, and to this day, I'm grateful for that. However, I was always a bit different, with a natural curiosity about how things work beyond the town's borders. In high school, I started experimenting with side hustles. I was never a traditional student, but I was excellent at finding opportunities where others didn't see them. I sold used books online, flipped old gadgets I found at garage sales, and even started a small lawn care business that took off faster than I anticipated. By the time I graduated, I'd made more money than most of my peers had with their part-time jobs. But I didn't stop there. I wanted something bigger, something that could change my life in a way a simple job or side hustle never could. I moved to the city after high school, full of ambition but no real plan. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything. The noise, the people, the opportunities. It was a far cry from my small-town upbringing. I rented a cheap apartment in a decent neighborhood and spent most of my days exploring the city, looking for gaps I could fill. I landed my first real job at a tech startup. I wasn't particularly skilled in tech, but I knew how to learn quickly and adapt. I started as a junior in the customer support team, answering calls and emails, helping frustrated customers with basic issues. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door, and I knew that if I kept my eyes open, I'd learn enough to climb higher. It didn't take long for me to realize that customer support wasn't where I wanted to stay. But there was something about the fast-paced nature of startups, the innovation, the long hours, the constant pressure, that intrigued me. I could feel the buzz of something bigger brewing. Within a year, I found myself pitching an idea to my boss, a new system for customer feedback that would make the process more efficient and provide the company with better insights into customer needs. I wasn't an expert in system design or development, but I had spent enough time around the office to see how things could be streamlined. My boss was skeptical but agreed to give me the green light. With little more than a notebook and a few hours after work, I designed the basic outline of the system. To my surprise, it worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what the company had been using, and it saved both time and money. This was my first real taste of success in the business world. Soon, I was given more responsibilities, climbing the ranks in the company, and eventually moving into a project management role. The more I learned, the more I realized that if I was going to make a real impact, I needed to build something of my own. So, with all the savings I had accumulated over the years, I decided to quit my job and launch my first startup. I started a digital marketing agency. It was an obvious choice for me since I had gained a lot of experience in tech and customer insights. But the road was far from easy. The first few months were brutal. I had no clients, no network, and no credibility. My only advantage was my ability to hustle. I started by offering my services at discounted rates, trying to prove my worth and build a portfolio. I reached out to small businesses, many of whom were skeptical about online marketing. I made cold calls, sent emails, and offered free consultations. Slowly, I began to land clients. But even then, the growth was slow. Every day was a struggle to stay afloat. One of the biggest challenges I faced was managing my cash flow. It's easy to assume that once you get a few clients, the money will roll in. But the reality is far more complicated. I had to constantly juggle invoices, late payments, and unexpected expenses. There were days when I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But I stuck with it, relying on my ability to learn from my mistakes and adjust quickly. Around the 1-year mark, I had a breakthrough. A major client in the e-commerce space hired me for a long-term contract. It was a game changer. This allowed me to hire a small team, invest in better tools, and expand my service offerings. I used every penny I made to reinvest into the business, knowing that the only way to grow was to scale. The next few years were a whirlwind. My agency grew faster than I had ever expected. We started working with bigger clients, building a reputation for delivering results. I hired a diverse team of people with expertise in different areas of digital marketing, and we quickly became a force to be reckoned with. But success came at a cost. I worked long hours, sacrificed personal time, and dealt with constant stress. There were days when I felt completely burned out. Yet, every time I reached a new milestone, it fueled me to push even harder. The breakthrough moment came when I decided to expand beyond digital marketing. I had been paying attention to trends in the industry and saw a massive gap in the online education space. People were looking for reliable, practical knowledge, but many of the available platforms were either too broad or too shallow. I decided to create a series of online courses focused on the practical application of digital marketing strategies. This was a completely new venture, and the risk was enormous. But I knew that if I could capture the attention of people who were serious about learning, this could be my next big win. The courses took off. I was able to leverage my agency's success and the relationships I had built to market them. People loved the hands-on, actionable advice I provided, and soon I had a growing community of learners. The courses became a secondary source of revenue that helped stabilize the business during slower periods. Looking back, it's almost surreal to think about where I started. From a small-town kid with a side hustle to running a successful agency and online education platform, the journey has been filled with setbacks, challenges, and hard-earned wins. I'm now in a position where I can make decisions based on what I love, not out of necessity. But I'll never forget those early days, the hustle, and the struggles that shaped who I am today. My business is more than just a company. It's a reflection of the tenacity and perseverance that got me here. And while I've reached a point of stability, I know this journey is far from over. The next chapter is waiting, and I'm ready to write it. I started my journey as an entrepreneur in my mid-20s, with nothing but a few ideas and a deep sense of frustration with the 9-to-5 grind. The corporate world never felt like it fit me, and I was constantly daydreaming about having my own business, but it seemed impossible. I had no capital, no connections, and no clear path. I felt stuck, but at the same time, the thought of working for someone else forever terrified me. So, one day, I decided to take a leap of faith, not because I knew exactly what I was doing, but because I had no other choice. It all started with a simple problem. I was living in a cramped apartment in the city, trying to make ends meet while juggling a series of dead-end jobs. I spent most of my time staring at a computer screen, helping others build their businesses and brands, but I was left wondering, why couldn't I build something of my own? I had always been interested in the world of e-commerce. I had seen friends launch successful online stores selling everything from t-shirts to tech gadgets, but I never thought I had what it took. One day, though, after watching a few videos about building a dropshipping business, something clicked. The concept was simple: sell products without holding inventory. It sounded too good to be true, but I figured, what did I have to lose? I spent the next several months researching, learning about marketing, finding suppliers, and testing different products. I had no experience in the field, and I made countless mistakes along the way. I launched my first online store, selling phone accessories, with a total investment of about $200, which was all I could scrape together from my savings. I built the website myself using a drag-and-drop platform, and I spent hours on social media trying to drive traffic to it. At first, nothing happened. For weeks, I barely made any sales, and I started to question whether this whole thing was just a waste of time. But then, something strange happened. A post on Reddit about one of the phone accessories I was selling went viral. A small group of people started sharing the product, and my store started receiving traffic. The orders trickled in at first, then gradually started to snowball. By the end of the first month, I had made a few $100s. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. I realized that people actually wanted what I was selling. I had a product people cared about, and that was the first step. However, the road wasn't easy. The business grew, but so did the challenges. As the orders started to roll in, I found myself overwhelmed. I had no experience with customer service, no system in place to manage inventory, even though I wasn't holding any, and I struggled to keep up with the demand. I was working 18-hour days, answering emails, fulfilling orders, and trying to keep up with my day job. It was a chaotic time, and I barely had time to eat or sleep. One day, I realized I had reached a breaking point. I was exhausted, and the pressure was beginning to take a toll on my health. I knew I couldn't keep this pace up for much longer. So, I made the decision to quit my job. It was terrifying. I had no backup plan, no safety net, but I felt like I had to go all in. I had already invested too much time and energy into this business to turn back now. That's when things really started to change. With all my time focused on the business, I was able to streamline processes, improve my website, and invest in paid advertising. I hired my first employee, someone who could help with customer service and order fulfillment. The first few months after quitting my job were the hardest. I had to deal with the stress of running a business full-time, while also trying to grow and scale it. But gradually, things started to pick up. By the end of my second year, my business had grown to the point where I could afford to hire more people, and I was able to move out of my tiny apartment into a bigger space. I invested in better technology, improved my marketing efforts, and started diversifying my product range. The revenue grew steadily, and by the third year, I was making 6 figures annually. It wasn't a huge fortune, but it was enough to give me the freedom I had been craving. I had built something from scratch, and it was mine. However, success didn't come without its challenges. I faced stiff competition, dealt with suppliers who let me down, and had to constantly adapt to changing market trends. There were moments of doubt when I questioned whether I had made the right decision, especially when things didn't go as planned. But each time I hit a roadblock, I found a way to overcome it. Now, 5 years into my journey, I'm running a thriving business. I've expanded into new product lines, hired a great team, and learned valuable lessons about leadership, perseverance, and adaptability. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm comfortable, and more importantly, I'm happy. I get to work on my own terms, and I'm building something meaningful. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I thought about giving up, but I didn't. The most important lesson I've learned is that entrepreneurship isn't a straight path. It's messy, unpredictable, and filled with obstacles. But it's also incredibly rewarding. If you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. Just start. Take the first step, no matter how small. Learn from your mistakes. Keep pushing forward, and never let fear hold you back. I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. Sure, there were times when I doubted myself, when the failures seemed endless, and when I felt like giving up. But every challenge taught me something, and every setback was a lesson in disguise. If you're willing to work hard, learn as you go, and stay committed to your vision, there's no limit to what you can achieve. So here it is. The story of how I turned a failing side hustle into a 7-figure business, almost lost it all, and then built it back from the ground up. This is the story of my journey from working in a cubicle to owning my own company, and it's probably nothing like what you'd expect. It all started about 7 years ago when I was still in a dead-end job, working as an analyst for a small firm. I hated every minute of it. My life was a blur of spreadsheets and meetings that felt pointless. At the time, I was stuck in a cycle of waking up, going to work, hating my job, and then doing it all over again the next day. On weekends, I'd binge-watch Netflix and try to forget about the monotony. But then, something changed. I started thinking about ways to escape. I knew there had to be something better out there. So, I began to tinker with ideas. I had always been interested in tech, specifically e-commerce, and I thought, why not start a business online? I could sell products, run ads, and work from home. That sounds much better than this soul-crushing job. I dove into learning everything I could about e-commerce, Facebook ads, and digital marketing. I remember staying up late, watching YouTube videos, and reading articles. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had that burning desire to break free. After a few months of research, I finally decided to launch my first store on Shopify. It was a basic dropshipping setup with some random products I found on AliExpress. I spent $500 to set up the store and another $500 to run Facebook ads. The idea was simple. I'd drive traffic to my site, get some sales, and eventually make enough money to quit my job. Sounds easy, right? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I launched the store, and for the first few weeks, nothing happened. No sales. No clicks. Nothing. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I thought I had everything figured out, the website looked good, the products were decent, and I was running ads like a pro. But still, crickets. By month 2, I had spent a few $1,000s on ads and had made $100 in sales. I was crushed. I started questioning myself. Was I stupid for quitting my job and thinking I could make it on my own? I had a few friends who were supportive, but most of them thought I was crazy. You're never going to make money with this, they'd say. I almost quit. But then I remembered why I started this in the first place. I didn't want to be stuck in that cubicle forever. I wanted to create something of my own. So, I kept going. At that point, I decided to take a different approach. I went back to the drawing board and revamped my whole strategy. I started focusing on a niche. Instead of selling random products, I chose a specific category: home fitness gear. I figured, with the rise of health consciousness and people working out at home, there was a market for it. I dug deeper into understanding my audience. I began reading fitness blogs, watching YouTube videos about home workouts, and interacting with people in fitness communities. I realized that people weren't just looking for any random gym equipment. They wanted high-quality, affordable, and space-saving products for their homes. I took these insights and used them to source better products. I also became obsessed with learning Facebook ads. I hired a mentor who had success in e-commerce and who could help me improve my ad campaigns. It was a game changer. I learned the right targeting techniques, the best ad copy, and how to optimize my campaigns to get more sales. Slowly, I began to see results. Sales trickled in at first, but over time, they started to build up. By the end of the year, I had managed to scale my business to about $10,000 a month in revenue. It wasn't life-changing money yet, but it was enough to let me quit my job. I remember the day I handed in my resignation letter. It was liberating. I was finally free from that cubicle life. I thought to myself, this is it. I'm never going back to a regular job again. The next few months were a blur of hard work and late nights. I had no employees yet, so it was just me handling everything, from customer service to inventory management to marketing. The pressure was immense, but I loved the freedom. I was building something that was truly mine. Then, I hit a massive roadblock. My business was growing rapidly, and I started running into operational problems. My supplier couldn't keep up with the demand, and my shipping times were atrocious. Customers were frustrated, and some of them started leaving bad reviews. I had to pause my ad campaigns and deal with the fallout. I was losing money fast. At this point, I thought the whole thing was over. I'd built this business from the ground up, and now it was all crumbling. I started to seriously consider going back to a regular job. The pressure was overwhelming. But once again, I refused to give up. I found new suppliers, streamlined my fulfillment process, and began improving my customer service. I also scaled back my marketing until I had everything back on track. It took a lot of time, money, and effort, but slowly, things started turning around. By the second year of my business, I had hired a small team. I hired a marketing manager, a customer service rep, and a fulfillment specialist. We worked together to improve operations, expand our product range, and scale our marketing efforts. I focused on building a brand and a loyal customer base. I knew I had to stand out from the competition, so I invested in unique packaging, better product quality, and creating valuable content for my audience. The turning point came when we launched our first influencer partnership. We worked with a popular fitness influencer who reviewed our products on their Instagram. The response was massive. Sales skyrocketed, and our brand got a huge boost in recognition. From that point on, things really took off. We were able to reinvest the profits into more ads, more influencers, and even expanding into international markets. Fast forward to today, and my company is a 7-figure business with a solid customer base, multiple employees, and a growing product range. I'm no longer just the guy in a cubicle. I'm a CEO, and I've been able to create a business that supports not only me, but also the livelihoods of my employees. I've learned a lot over the years, and I think the biggest lesson is simple. You can't quit when things get tough. Every business goes through hard times, and if you're serious about your dreams, you'll find a way to make it work. It's not easy, and there will be plenty of failures along the way, but the key is persistence. Looking back, I never imagined I would be where I am today. I started out just trying to escape a job I hated, but now I'm building something that excites me every single day. If you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, just know this: it's possible. If I can do it, so can you. Keep pushing, keep learning, and never stop believing in yourself. Thanks for reading. I was in my mid-20s when I made the decision that would change the course of my life forever. At the time, I had a secure job as a marketing coordinator for a medium-sized company. The work wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it was stable, and I had a decent paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. It was exactly what most people would consider the ideal safe job, but it wasn't fulfilling. I felt like I was wasting my potential. It all started one night when I was scrolling through Reddit. I stumbled across a post about a guy who built an online business from the ground up. He started with nothing, just a laptop, and now he was pulling in 6 figures a month. At first, I thought, this is one of those get-rich-quick schemes. But the more I read, the more I realized that it wasn't a scam. It was hard work and perseverance, and it was something I could do. I had no background in business or entrepreneurship, but something about that story sparked a fire in me. I remember lying in bed that night, wide awake, thinking about my own life. I had all these ideas in my head about what I could do if I just took the leap. I felt like I could create something of my own, but the fear was overwhelming. What if I failed? What if it was a huge mistake? I had bills to pay, student loans, and a family to think about. The safety of my current job kept me tethered, and the idea of leaving it behind seemed terrifying. For weeks, I went back and forth in my mind. I'd wake up every day, go to my 9 to 5, and feel this sense of dread hanging over me. Then, one afternoon, something happened that pushed me over the edge. It was a Wednesday, and I had just returned from a meeting with my boss. I had worked on a proposal for a major campaign, but my boss didn't seem impressed with it. He gave me some vague feedback and sent me back to the drawing board. As I sat at my desk, feeling frustrated, I had an epiphany. I was working my butt off for someone else's dream. I was putting in all this energy and creativity, but it was never going to be mine. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait around anymore. I was going to build my own business. I didn't have a concrete plan, but I knew I had to start. So, I quit my job. No, I didn't have a backup job lined up. And no, I didn't have a large savings account. I just knew that I couldn't stay in that job anymore. The idea of spending another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years stuck in that same position made me feel suffocated. I needed to take control of my future, even if it meant risking everything. I spent the next few weeks doing research, reading books, watching YouTube videos, and absorbing as much as I could about starting a business. I came across the idea of e-commerce, particularly dropshipping. For those who aren't familiar, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products online without holding any inventory. When a customer orders something, you buy it from a third-party supplier who ships it directly to the customer. It seemed like the perfect low-risk way to start a business with minimal investment. I decided to dive in head first. I spend hours every day researching suppliers, building a website, and figuring out how to market the products. My first store was awful, cluttered, unprofessional, and poorly designed. But I didn't care. I was learning. I remember launching the website and just staring at it, wondering if anyone would ever buy anything. I didn't even have any expectations, to be honest. I just wanted to see if this idea could work. The first few weeks were brutal. I didn't make a single sale. It was discouraging, to say the least. I'd check the website stats every day, and there was always that same 0 in the sales column. I almost gave up multiple times. But I kept pushing forward, tweaking the website, testing different ads, and learning from my mistakes. Then, one day, something magical happened. A sale came through. I was over the moon. It wasn't much, just a $25 product, but it was proof that it could work. I had cracked the code, and that sale gave me the motivation I needed to keep going. I didn't stop there. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, improving my ads, expanding my product offerings, and experimenting with different marketing strategies. Slowly but surely, the sales started to increase. I was still far from where I wanted to be, but the progress was undeniable. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were times when suppliers failed to ship products, customer complaints piled up, and my ad campaigns bombed. But through all the setbacks, I learned to adapt. I learned how to handle customer service, how to optimize ads, and how to streamline my operations. Every mistake was a lesson in disguise. After about 6 months, my business was making enough money that I could comfortably quit my day job and work on it full-time. It was a surreal moment. I had taken that leap of faith, and it was paying off. But I knew this was just the beginning. The challenges were far from over. As the months passed, I continued to scale the business. I hired my first employee to help with customer service, and eventually, I built a small team to handle the day-to-day operations. I also expanded into other areas, like digital products and subscription boxes, diversifying my income streams. My revenue grew exponentially, and by my second year, I was making 6 figures. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I thought about quitting, but the journey taught me more about myself than I could have ever imagined. I learned to embrace failure, push through the tough times, and keep believing in my vision, even when the odds were stacked against me. Today, my business is thriving, and I'm proud of what I've built. But the most rewarding part isn't the money or the success, it's the freedom. I have the freedom to work from anywhere, the freedom to make my own decisions, and the freedom to live life on my terms. I wake up every day excited about what I'm building, and I know that none of this would have been possible if I hadn't taken that first step and decided to take a risk. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone reading this, it's this: don't let fear hold you back. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, it's all natural. But you'll never know what you're capable of unless you take that leap. It won't be easy, but the rewards are worth it. Believe in yourself, trust the process, and keep going. If I can do it, so can you. I was 26 when I decided to quit my job and take a leap into entrepreneurship. I didn't come from a wealthy background or have connections in high places. I was just a kid from a small town with big dreams and an even bigger gut feeling that I could make something of myself. Everyone around me thought I was crazy. I remember my parents' faces when I told them I was going to leave the stability of my 9-to-5 job and try to start my own business. They weren't mad, just worried. And I could see why. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have any savings, and frankly, I had no idea what I was doing. But there was something inside me, a fire, that kept pushing me. I had always been fascinated by technology, and one day while I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a post about a new app that promised to revolutionize a market that I was incredibly familiar with. It wasn't the next Facebook or Instagram. No, this was something more niche, an app that could help small businesses streamline their operations, track inventory, and improve customer service all in one place. I started to think, what if I could make something like this, but better? The idea seemed perfect. I knew firsthand the struggles of small business owners. They didn't have the budgets for expensive enterprise software, but they still needed something to help them manage their operations. I'd spent years working in retail and customer service, so I understood their pain points. I started doing research. A lot of research. I spent countless nights reading articles, watching tutorials, and reaching out to developers who might be able to help me bring my idea to life. The first few months were rough. I didn't have much money to invest, and everything I was doing felt like a shot in the dark. I had no technical skills, so when I tried to explain my ideas to developers, I often felt lost in the jargon. Still, I kept pushing. I convinced a local developer to work with me on a small budget, and we started building the prototype. The first version of the app was rough. Really rough. But it worked. Barely. It allowed businesses to input basic inventory information, track their sales, and monitor customer interactions, all from a single dashboard. I spent hours tinkering with the app myself, trying to make it more user-friendly and more efficient. But no matter how much I worked on it, the app still felt clunky. It wasn't quite ready for launch, but I didn't have time to keep refining it. I needed customers. And fast. I put together a simple website, reached out to a few friends in business, and started offering the app to anyone who would listen. I didn't expect much at first, but I was wrong. I started getting emails from small business owners who wanted to try the app. Some of them even offered to pay me for access. The validation I got from those first customers was incredible. It was proof that I wasn't just chasing a pipe dream. The problem was, I was still working full-time at my regular job. So, I'd spend my nights and weekends tweaking the app and answering customer inquiries. I was exhausted all the time. But I couldn't stop. I knew that if I just kept going, I could turn this into something big. Months went by, and the app started to gain traction. The feedback I was getting from users was mostly positive, but there were definitely a lot of bugs and features that needed improvement. I couldn't afford to hire a large team yet, So I continued to handle everything myself: sales, customer service, development, marketing. It was overwhelming, but I loved every second of it. Around the 6-month mark, I hit a wall. The app had grown enough that I needed to make some serious decisions. I couldn't continue doing everything myself, and I couldn't keep my day job if I wanted to fully dedicate myself to the business. So, I took the plunge. I left my job and decided to go all in on my app. That was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. Leaving the safety of a paycheck and plunging into the unknown was terrifying. But deep down, I knew it was the right move. The next few months were a blur. I spent every waking moment working on the business. I hired a small team of developers and designers to help me polish the app and fix the bugs. I also started focusing more on marketing, learning about SEO, social media advertising, and content marketing. I won't lie, there were times when I wanted to quit. I'd be up late at night, staring at my screen, wondering if I was even cut out for this. But then I'd remember why I started: to help small businesses like the ones I used to work for. That kept me going. One day, I got an email from a small business owner who said that the app had helped him save hundreds of hours of work and increased his sales by 20%. I was ecstatic. It felt like everything was finally starting to pay off. That was the moment I knew I was onto something real. The next year was a whirlwind. The app grew rapidly. We attracted more users, and with that, more paying customers. I reinvested all the profits back into the business, hiring more people, improving the product, and expanding our marketing efforts. Slowly but surely, the business began to take shape. We launched additional features that allowed businesses to integrate with other software, and we started offering customer support around the clock. Fast forward to today, and my company is no longer a small startup. We're now a leader in our niche, with thousands of customers across the country. The team I've built is incredible, and I've been able to take a step back from the day-to-day operations. I now spend my time working on new features, expanding our reach, and building relationships with other entrepreneurs. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, when I thought the whole thing was a pipe dream. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that persistence pays off. If you keep showing up, keep pushing forward, even when things look impossible, you can achieve something truly incredible. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not some Silicon Valley success story, but I am proud of what I've built. I took a chance, followed my gut, and turned an idea into a thriving business. And that, to me, is worth more than any paycheck I could have ever received. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, just know this: it's not going to be easy. It's going to be long hours, rejection, setbacks, and a lot of moments when you question whether it's all worth it. But if you have that fire inside you, if you truly believe in your idea and your vision, don't let fear hold you back. Start small, start messy, and never stop pushing. There's a world of opportunity out there. Go grab it. A few years ago, I was sitting in a small, rundown apartment, staring at a pile of bills I couldn't pay, wondering if my dream of being an entrepreneur would ever become a reality. I had just lost my job, the third one in a row in less than 2 years. I was in my mid-20s, living paycheck to paycheck, and my bank account was constantly on the verge of zero. I had a passion for technology, but I didn't know how to turn it into something profitable. I spent countless hours scrolling through Reddit, reading success stories of people who had built multi-million-dollar businesses from scratch. They all seemed to have a common theme. They started small, faced obstacles, and found a way to make their ideas work. I was inspired but also intimidated. These people were brilliant, and here I was, barely able to keep my head above water. But then, something clicked. One late night, I saw a post about a guy who had started a side hustle with a product he was passionate about. He was just like me. No connections, no fancy education, but he had a relentless drive to succeed. That post gave me a spark of hope. If he could do it, why couldn't I? I decided I was going to try something, anything. I had no clear business idea, but I knew I loved technology and gadgets. I'd been building and fixing computers as a hobby for years, so why not turn that into a business? The concept was simple. I would start a computer repair business and offer tech services to people who couldn't afford the expensive repairs at big stores. The first step was creating a website. I had no money to hire someone, so I had to learn how to build it myself. I spent days watching YouTube tutorials on web development, graphic design, and SEO. I was clueless at first, but gradually, I pieced it together. The website was basic, but it was mine. I also set up a business email and created social media accounts. I had no idea what I was doing, but I felt a sense of accomplishment just getting those first steps out of the way. The next challenge was getting customers. I didn't have the budget for paid ads or marketing campaigns. Instead, I turned to the one thing I knew best, Reddit. I started posting in local subreddits, offering free consultations and repairs for anyone who needed help. The responses were slow at first, but eventually, I got a few bites. I repaired a laptop for a guy who worked at a local startup. He was so impressed with my work that he referred me to a few of his colleagues. From there, things started snowballing. Word of mouth spread, and I began getting more clients, including small businesses that needed tech support. I was still living in my tiny apartment, but I had a steady stream of work. The income wasn't much, but it was enough to cover my bills and put a little extra into savings. I was thrilled. It was the first time I had felt in control of my finances in years. But, of course, running a business wasn't easy. There were days when everything seemed to go wrong. One time, I accidentally deleted a client's important files while attempting a system repair. They were furious, and I was terrified I'd lose their business. I worked through the night, recovering as much of the data as I could, and offered them a huge discount on the next service. Thankfully, they appreciated my dedication and stuck with me. That experience taught me an important lesson. Mistakes happen, but it's how you handle them that matters. As time went on, my business grew. I moved into a small office space to separate my work from my personal life. I hired a few employees to help with repairs and customer support, and I started offering additional services like computer training and software installations. My website became more professional, and I even invested in some basic digital advertising. I started seeing the numbers grow, and for the first time, I felt like my hard work was paying off. But just as things were starting to look up, the pandemic hit. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. People stopped coming in for repairs, and my service requests dropped drastically. The economy was uncertain, and I was terrified that my business would collapse like so many others. For a while, I considered giving up. I was burned out, stressed, and unsure how to pivot in such a rapidly changing world. Then, in a moment of desperation, I decided to pivot my business model. With more people working from home and schools transitioning to online learning, the demand for reliable tech support was higher than ever. I quickly shifted my focus to remote support. Instead of waiting for people to bring their broken computers to my office, I began offering remote repair services. I also started offering virtual tech consultations to help people set up home offices and classrooms. At first, it was slow going. Many of my clients were skeptical about remote repairs and consultations, but I leaned into my existing relationships with customers, reassuring them that I could fix their issues from a distance. I even started offering DIY repair guides and video tutorials to build trust and show people that they could handle simple issues on their own. Before I knew it, business picked up again. People needed help, and I was the person they turned to. I grew my team, hired a few more remote technicians, and began offering subscription-based support for individuals and businesses. My revenue grew exponentially, and for the first time, I felt like I had a real business on my hands. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. What started as a small computer repair business run out of a tiny apartment has now turned into a thriving tech support company with a growing team of employees. I'm no longer struggling to pay my bills or living paycheck to paycheck. I have a sense of financial stability, and most importantly, I have a sense of purpose. I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't about having all the answers up front. It's about taking that first step, even when you have no idea what the next one will be. It's about learning from your mistakes, adapting to change, and finding ways to keep going even when things get tough. The journey hasn't been easy, and I'm sure there are more challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, I feel confident about the future. I know that no matter what happens, I have the skills, the experience, and the determination to keep going. If you're reading this and feeling stuck, know that you're not alone. I was once in your shoes, uncertain about the future and unsure how to get started. But if you have a passion, a drive to learn, and the willingness to push through the hard times, anything is possible. Keep going, even when it feels impossible, because you never know when the next opportunity will present itself. If I can do it, so can you. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I had always been the type of person who believed in taking the road less traveled, but it wasn't always easy. I had a lot of people who doubted me, told me I was dreaming too big, or said that my ideas were impractical. It's funny, though, how often those same people are the ones who end up wishing they had taken the same leap of faith. This is the story of how I went from barely scraping by to building a business that changed my life. It all started when I was 24. I had just graduated college with a degree in business management. I had dreams of becoming the next big entrepreneur, but there was one problem: I didn't have any money. My family wasn't rich, and after 4 years of schooling, I was buried in student debt. So, I found myself working a 9-to-5 job at a retail company, pushing paper, dealing with ungrateful customers, and generally feeling like my life was stagnating. I remember one night, I was sitting on my couch after work, scrolling through Instagram, when I saw a post from someone I went to school with. He had just launched his own startup, a small tech company, and was doing well. It wasn't groundbreaking or anything, but it made me feel a burning sense of possibility. I thought, why not me? Why can't I build something like this? I had no real technical skills at the time. I wasn't a coder, I didn't have connections, and I certainly didn't have any money to invest. But what I did have was a relentless work ethic, an unwillingness to quit, and a passion for problem solving. I decided to take the plunge and start my own business, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had to try. At first, I tried to develop a mobile app. It seemed like the easiest way to break into the tech world. I had an idea for an app that would help people track their health goals, set reminders, and monitor their progress over time. Simple, right? I spent weeks researching, learning coding basics, reading blog posts, and trying to piece everything together. It was a mess. The app didn't work, and every time I tried to make it better, it just seemed to get worse. I was spending money I didn't have, burning through savings, and feeling more and more defeated by the day. I nearly gave up. The dream of building something from nothing was slipping away, and the self-doubt was creeping in. I remember one particularly rough night, staring at my laptop screen, frustrated beyond belief, when I got a message from an old friend. He had seen some of my posts about my business attempts and wanted to offer some advice. He told me, "You're trying to do too much at once. Focus on one thing and do it well. The tech world is crowded, and unless you have a breakthrough idea, you're just another app in the sea of thousands." That conversation changed everything. I realized he was right. The problem wasn't the idea, it was the execution. Instead of trying to create something that competed with big players like Fitbit or MyFitnessPal, I needed to focus on something smaller and more niche. That's when it hit me. I could create a personalized fitness coach, someone who would help people tailor their workout and nutrition plans based on their individual goals. Not a generic app that anyone could use, but something that could provide real value to people who struggle to get started on their fitness journeys. I decided to pivot. I stopped working on the app for a while and began researching the fitness coaching industry. I spoke to personal trainers, nutritionists, and people who were into fitness but struggled to stick to a routine. I learned about the challenges they faced, finding the right resources, staying motivated, and not having the time to create personalized workout and diet plans that fit their unique needs. There was a huge gap in the market for affordable, personalized fitness coaching, and I was determined to fill it. I had zero money to invest in building this new product, so I had to get creative. I used free platforms like WordPress to build a basic website, and I started offering my services as a personal fitness coach. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I set up a simple booking system, wrote blog posts about fitness, and began offering online consultations. Slowly, people started reaching out. They wanted personalized workout plans, meal suggestions, and advice on staying motivated. At first, it was just a few clients a week, but word spread quickly. I made sure to give every single client my full attention. I replied to emails within hours, gave them the best service I could offer, and always asked for feedback to improve. Eventually, I built a reputation as someone who genuinely cared about helping people get fit and healthy. I learned that the key to success wasn't just in offering a product, it was in building relationships. Within 6 months, I started making enough money to quit my retail job. I was now working full-time on my fitness coaching business, and I couldn't have been more excited. But the hard work was just beginning. I invested everything I earned back into the business. I hired a team to help with social media marketing, web design, and content creation. I partnered with other fitness influencers to expand my reach, and I continued to listen to my clients' needs. I developed an app that paired with my coaching service, which allowed clients to track their progress and communicate with me directly. 2 years later, my business had grown into something I could have never imagined. I had a team of 15 people working for me. My revenue was in the six figures, and I was finally living the life I had dreamed of. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about knowing I had built something from nothing, and that I had helped thousands of people change their lives for the better. Looking back, there are so many things I would have done differently, but I have no regrets. Every failure, every late night, and every mistake was a stepping stone to where I am today. I learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It's about resilience, perseverance, and the willingness to keep going even when things seem impossible. I'm not where I want to be yet. There's still so much more I want to achieve, and I'm constantly learning and growing. But I can say, with certainty, that starting my own business was the best decision I ever made. And if you're thinking about taking the leap, know this: the road is tough, but it's worth it. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big. I never thought I would be here, telling this story. It's not the kind of thing I thought would happen to someone like me, but here we are. This is a tale about hustle, failure, and eventually, success. It all started when I was 22 years old. I had just graduated college with a degree in finance. To be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. Everyone around me seemed to have it all figured out: jobs lined up, internships with big companies, and dreams of working on Wall Street. But not me. I felt lost. I had always been a creative person, but I had been told time and time again that you couldn't make money from creativity. So, I buried it. I figured I'd follow the logical path, get a steady job, climb the corporate ladder, and live a comfortable life. That's what society tells you, right? So, I ended up in a decent job at a mid-sized financial firm. The pay was good, and the benefits were even better. But something felt off. The work was dull. The endless spreadsheets and reports drained me. I couldn't help but think about what I was doing with my life. I didn't feel fulfilled, and I sure as hell didn't feel like I was building anything. Every day felt the same, and I started resenting my job. At the time, I was living in a small apartment in a city that was constantly buzzing with energy. I'd walk past coffee shops filled with people typing away on laptops, and I couldn't help but wonder what they were working on. They looked so free. I envied them. But the most interesting part? Many of them seemed to be working on their own projects. I had no idea what those projects were, but it inspired me. It ignited a spark deep down that I hadn't felt in years. One day, after a particularly soul-crushing meeting with my boss, where I was once again told that I didn't have the right mindset for a promotion, I went home and started thinking. I realized that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't spend my entire life working for someone else, climbing a ladder I didn't even want to be on. I wanted something more. Something for me. I didn't know what that something was, but I knew I had to try something. And that's when I started researching online business ideas. I spent hours every day reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and joining online forums. Eventually, I stumbled upon something that piqued my interest: dropshipping. At first, I thought it sounded too good to be true. You mean I could sell products online without having to keep any inventory? It felt like the perfect fit for someone like me who didn't have a ton of upfront capital to invest. I could run the business from home, be my own boss, and have the freedom I'd been craving. The only problem? I knew absolutely nothing about running a business. I was completely green, but I didn't let that stop me. I poured everything I had into learning. I watched countless tutorials, joined Facebook groups, and connected with people who had been successful in the dropshipping game. I'll be honest, it wasn't easy. I made mistake after mistake. I spent money on ads that didn't convert. I picked the wrong products that nobody wanted to buy. I felt like quitting more times than I can count, but I kept going. Slowly, I started figuring out the nuances. I found products that actually sold. I optimized my website. I tweaked my ads until they started working. And after a few months of blood, sweat, and tears, I made my first sale. It wasn't much, just a $30 item, but it was enough to make me believe that I could actually make this work. The next few months were a blur. I kept improving my store, testing new products, and scaling up my ads. With each new sale, my confidence grew. I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. And then, one day, I woke up to a notification. I had made over $1,000 in a single day. It was a moment I will never forget. My dream was no longer a dream. It was real. I had built something from scratch. But success didn't come without its challenges. As my business grew, so did the problems. I had to hire a team of customer service representatives. I had to figure out how to handle logistics and ensure the products actually arrived on time. I started running into issues with suppliers who didn't ship products fast enough. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed. There was one point when I nearly gave up. My supplier had messed up an entire order for a group of customers, and they were demanding refunds. I had already spent most of the money I made on reinvesting in the business, and I didn't have enough left to cover all the refunds. I remember sitting on the floor of my office, looking at my computer screen, wondering how I was going to get out of this hole. But then, something clicked. I realized I couldn't keep doing everything myself. I needed to delegate. I needed to build a system that would work without me micromanaging every single detail. So, I hired a team. I worked with fulfillment centers that could handle my orders more efficiently. I partnered with better suppliers who cared about their reputation as much as I did. Slowly but surely, things began to run more smoothly. And then, just when I thought I had it all figured out, the market changed. Competition grew fiercer, Facebook ads became more expensive, and my margins started shrinking. For the first time, I found myself genuinely worried about the future of my business. I had to adapt again. I expanded my business into new markets, focused on branding, and explored new sales channels. Today, I run a successful e-commerce business. I've been able to scale it to the point where I don't have to worry about the daily grind anymore. I have a dedicated team, multiple revenue streams, and most importantly, freedom. I wake up every day knowing I'm doing something I love, and that's a feeling I never thought I would have. It hasn't been easy, though. There have been countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and near financial ruin. But the journey has been worth it. I've learned more about myself than I ever thought possible. I've learned that success doesn't come without failure, and that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the hardest struggles. So, to anyone out there reading this who's stuck in a job they hate or feels like they'll never be able to build something of their own, I want to say this: keep going. The path won't be easy, and there will be times when it feels like the universe is working against you. But if you're willing to push through the hard times and stay focused on your goals, you will find a way. Trust me, I've been there. Believe in yourself, keep hustling, and success will eventually follow. I always thought entrepreneurship was something only for the lucky ones, the ones who already had a rich uncle or a trust fund. Growing up, I was a kid from a modest background. My family didn't have a lot of money, and I spent most of my teenage years watching my parents hustle to make ends meet. But one thing my mom always told me was, don't let your circumstances define you. You can do anything if you're willing to work hard enough. I didn't believe her at first, but something about her words stuck with me. Fast forward to when I was 23, freshly graduated with a degree in marketing, but I had no job lined up. The job market was tough, and I struggled to find something that aligned with my degree. I spent months working dead-end retail jobs and bouncing between internships. I was desperate for an opportunity that could give me a real shot at something bigger. That's when I had an idea. What if I could create something of my own? I wasn't exactly sure what, but I started looking into online businesses. I had always been into tech and social media, so I thought, why not try building a brand around that? After some research, I found a niche in the e-commerce space that seemed to have potential. It wasn't the kind of business everyone was jumping into, but it felt right for me. So, with no savings, no investor, and no real experience, I decided to dive in. I remember setting up a basic Shopify store, not knowing what I was doing but determined to learn along the way. I scrolled through YouTube videos late into the night, learning how to design a website, how to choose products, how to run Facebook ads. I even watched videos on basic graphic design because I couldn't afford to hire a professional. I spent weeks trying to make the store look somewhat decent. I had no branding skills, no product photography skills, just a drive to get this thing off the ground. After weeks of trial and error, I finally launched my store. The first week was a complete bust. No sales, no traffic, nothing. I remember feeling embarrassed. I had put so much time and effort into it, and no one seemed to care. But I was too stubborn to give up. I spent the next few months tweaking my ad campaigns, optimizing my website, and testing new products. Slowly but surely, I started getting some traction. I sold my first product, then my second, then my fifth. But that's when reality hit. I was making sales, but the profit margins were tiny. I was making just enough to cover the cost of running the store and ads, with barely anything left over for myself. I knew I had to find a way to scale up if I wanted this business to become sustainable. That's when I made a big decision. I would focus on building my own brand. I started shifting away from generic products and began designing my own custom products that were unique to my store. This required a bigger investment up front, and I didn't have the funds. I started looking for funding options, but traditional banks wouldn't touch me. I was too young, and my credit history wasn't great. That's when I discovered crowdfunding. I created a crowdfunding campaign for my new product line, pitching it as something different from everything else on the market. It was risky. If I didn't hit my goal, I would be left with nothing. But I poured my heart into the campaign, sharing my story of being a broke college graduate trying to make something of himself. To my surprise, the campaign was a success. Not only did I hit my funding goal, but I also exceeded it. The confidence I gained from that moment was a turning point. With the funds from crowdfunding, I launched my custom products. It was a game changer. As I expanded my product line, I hired a small team to help with fulfillment, customer service, and marketing. The next few months were filled with long hours, challenges, and learning experiences, but I started seeing real profit. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to keep reinvesting back into the business. A year went by, and my online store was growing steadily. Then, one day, I received an email from a big influencer in my niche, someone with a massive following on Instagram and YouTube. They wanted to collaborate. This was a huge opportunity, but it also meant taking a risk. I had to pay them a substantial fee up front, which would eat into my profits. But I knew it could pay off big time. I took the risk and partnered with the influencer. They shared my products with their followers, and sales went through the roof. It was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. My store's revenue doubled, then tripled. I couldn't believe it. What had started as a hobby was now a full-fledged business. But success came with its own set of problems. As the business grew, so did the demands. My team expanded, and we moved into a larger warehouse to handle the influx of orders. I had to hire more staff, and with that came more complexities, inventory management, customer service, returns, and all the other logistics I never anticipated. The pressure was immense, and there were times I felt like I was in over my head. But each challenge also taught me something valuable. I learned how to streamline operations, negotiate with suppliers, and handle the financial side of things. I invested in software that automated many of the tedious tasks and freed up my time to focus on growth. I began studying leadership and management skills, reading books, and taking courses to become a better boss. 2 years into the business, I reached a point where I had to make a decision. I had grown my brand to a point where I was getting attention from investors, but I had to ask myself whether I was ready to give up control. The idea of selling my business was tempting. There was a huge offer on the table, but I realized that I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. I wanted to keep building, to prove that I could take this thing to the next level on my own. So, I turned down the offer and kept pushing forward. Fast forward to today, and my brand is one of the leaders in its niche. We've expanded into international markets, and I now have a team of over 50 people. Looking back, I never imagined I'd get here. It wasn't a straight line to success. There were countless setbacks, moments where I doubted myself, and plenty of mistakes along the way. But the one thing that kept me going was that deep belief my mom instilled in me. Hard work and perseverance can break through any barrier. I'm still learning every day, still making mistakes, but now I'm in a position where I can help others who are starting out. I get messages from young entrepreneurs asking for advice, and I always tell them the same thing. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't make it. Be ready to fail, but don't let failure define you. And always keep pushing forward. Building a business wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was also the most rewarding. If someone had told me back when I was struggling in my retail job that I'd one day be running a successful company, I never would have believed them. But here I am, and I'm proof that hard work, persistence, and a willingness to learn can turn dreams into reality. I had always been that kid who loved fixing things. Growing up, while other kids played sports or video games, I spent hours tinkering with broken radios, old bikes, and even my dad's beat-up lawnmower. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life at the time, but I knew one thing. I loved figuring out how things worked, and I had a knack for making things better. That curiosity turned into a hobby, and over time, a small side hustle, but little did I know, it would eventually change the trajectory of my entire life. After high school, I decided to follow the traditional path and went to college to study mechanical engineering. I was good at it, but something about the rigid structure of school never sat well with me. I was always more interested in applying knowledge to real-world problems than memorizing theories in textbooks. After graduating, I landed a job at a well-known engineering firm. The pay was decent, and I was working on exciting projects. But as time went on, I began to feel suffocated by the corporate environment. I wasn't happy working on projects where the end result was just another product that would sit on a shelf. I felt like I was simply a cog in the machine. The tipping point came one afternoon when I was assigned to a project that I felt had little impact. It was a simple design for a mass-market product that would be sold in huge quantities. The work wasn't challenging, and the whole process felt repetitive and uninspiring. I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life in a cubicle. So, I took a leap of faith. I quit my job, and despite having little savings, I decided to start my own business. At first, I didn't know what the business would be. I knew I had some technical skills, but I needed to find a way to apply them in a way that was both profitable and meaningful. One day, while I was walking through a local park, I noticed how many people were using electric scooters. These scooters were all the rage in urban areas, and I couldn't help but think how inefficient and flimsy many of them seemed. I began to wonder, what if I could create a more durable, efficient scooter, one that people would actually want to invest in, not just something to get from point A to point B. I spent the next few months researching electric scooters, studying how they were made, and identifying the pain points customers had with existing models. I visited scooter repair shops, talked to users, and analyzed customer reviews. What I found was that the current market lacked a high-quality, long-lasting option for people who actually wanted to get a good return on their investment. Most of the scooters on the market were poorly made, with cheap materials that broke easily or had battery life that didn't last more than a few years. There was definitely an opportunity to create something better. The idea of building a more reliable, high-performance scooter started to feel more like a reality. I had some savings left from my previous job, and I decided to use it to start the business. I rented a small workshop space, bought some basic equipment, and began prototyping. The first few months were a blur. I worked long hours, sometimes 12, 14, even 16 hours a day. I was designing parts, sourcing materials, and testing prototypes. But every time I thought I had it right, something would go wrong. I'd end up with a scooter that wouldn't turn on, or the battery would fail after a few miles. It was incredibly frustrating, and there were times I wanted to give up. But I kept reminding myself why I started. I wanted to create something that would truly change the way people commuted, something people would be proud to own. After about 6 months of trial and error, I finally built a prototype that worked. It had a sleek design, a longer-lasting battery, and it was much more durable than anything I'd seen on the market. I was thrilled, but I knew that the real challenge was still ahead, getting people to buy it. I started small, selling the scooters locally through word of mouth and online ads. At first, sales were slow. I wasn't sure how to market the product effectively, and people didn't really know who I was or trust a small company. But I had one advantage. I was passionate about what I was doing. I spent hours on social media, responding to customer questions, posting videos of my scooters in action, and sharing the story of how I started the company. Slowly but surely, people started taking notice. One day, I got a message from a well-known influencer in the electric vehicle space who wanted to try out one of my scooters. At that point, my business was still small, and I didn't have the resources to send free products to everyone. But this was a big opportunity. I sent her a scooter, hoping she'd love it, and to my surprise, she did. She posted a review on her Instagram, and overnight, my small business was inundated with orders. That's when I realized the power of social proof. People wanted to buy from a brand they could trust, and they were willing to pay for quality. The flood of orders was overwhelming, but it was also the boost I needed. I reinvested the profits back into the business, hired a small team, and started improving the product line. Over the next few years, my company grew exponentially. We expanded our product range to include accessories, and I partnered with several retail stores to get my scooters into the hands of more people. Today, my company is a multi-million-dollar business. We've sold tens of thousands of scooters, and our brand is recognized worldwide. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. There were so many moments when I doubted myself, but I kept going because I believed in the product. I believed in the vision. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that success isn't about having the perfect plan. It's about having the courage to take that first step, even when you're unsure of where it will lead. If you're willing to put in the work and stay true to your passion, anything is possible. It wasn't just about building a scooter. It was about building a brand that people could rely on and a product that would improve their lives. Now, as I look at the business I've built, I know that my journey is just beginning. There are still so many opportunities to explore, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So, if you're out there thinking about taking a leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: do it. Start small, be persistent, And most importantly, don't give up. The road ahead may not always be easy, but it will be worth it. I've always been the type to think outside the box. Growing up, I was the kid who'd tinker with old electronics, break apart toys just to figure out how they worked, and always had a little side hustle selling things I didn't need, usually on eBay. But I never imagined my love for technology would lead me to create something that would completely change my life. My story begins in the middle of nowhere. I was living in a small town where opportunities felt limited, and honestly, so did the people around me. Everyone was content with the status quo. Get a 9 to 5, raise a family, buy a house, and live a simple life. And while that's perfectly fine for some, it never sat right with me. I wanted something more, something bigger. When I finished high school, I enrolled in a local college. To be honest, I wasn't a top student. I wasn't the smartest, nor was I the hardest working. But I had something that most didn't, an insatiable curiosity. I wasn't driven by grades. I was driven by ideas. I'd spend hours after class learning things that fascinated me, watching YouTube tutorials, attending tech meetups, and reading blogs. I started to get obsessed with one thing: how businesses made money. I took a job at a tech company right after graduation, mostly to make ends meet. The pay wasn't great, but it allowed me to live on my own and continue working on my projects. I would spend my free time after work on side hustles. Some were successful, many were not. But I kept grinding. I had a dream, even though I wasn't entirely sure what it was. Then one day, the idea hit me out of nowhere. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by old laptops and random electronics, when I realized that all the tech products I owned were, well, just too complicated. They were often hard to set up, even harder to use, and, most importantly, expensive as hell. I thought, why couldn't I create a product that was simple, easy to use, and affordable? Something for the everyday person, not just the tech geeks? I started sketching out ideas. My concept was simple: create a tech product that anyone could use with minimal setup and effort. I was inspired by my own frustrations as a tech enthusiast who wasn't a tech expert, trying to deal with complicated software, confusing interfaces, and constant updates. I wanted to build something that would eliminate all that. But here's the thing: I had zero experience in product design or development. I was just a guy with a passion for technology and a dream. So, I started doing what any self-respecting entrepreneur would do. I Googled the hell out of it. I learned everything I could about product development, supply chain management, user experience, and crowdfunding. I spent days and nights reading books and watching interviews with successful entrepreneurs. Slowly but surely, I began to understand what it took to build a product from scratch. I figured that if I could create a prototype and prove it worked, I might be able to attract some investors or even customers. The first product I created was a simple, affordable, and easy-to-use wireless speaker. I designed it to look sleek and modern, but it was packed with features that most of the competition lacked, like long battery life, water resistance, and intuitive controls. The only problem was that I didn't have any money to actually produce it. I decided to try crowdfunding. I set up a campaign on Kickstarter, hoping that people would see the value in my idea. I spent weeks preparing the campaign, creating a pitch video, writing copy, and designing graphics. I poured my heart into it. The campaign launched, and for the first few days, nothing happened. It was silent. I wasn't getting any traction. I began to question whether I was wasting my time. But I refused to give up. I kept promoting the campaign on social media, reached out to bloggers, and networked with anyone who might be interested. Then, something miraculous happened. On day 5, the campaign gained momentum. I started seeing backers trickling in, then more and more. It was like the floodgates had opened. People were excited about the idea, and more importantly, they trusted me enough to invest in it. By the end of the month, I had raised enough money to begin production. That's when I realized how hard this was going to be. It wasn't just about making the product, it was about managing everything that came with it. I had to figure out manufacturing, shipping, customer support, and marketing. All of it fell on my shoulders. I remember staying up for days, answering emails from backers, dealing with supply chain delays, and trying to make sure everything was perfect. But despite the chaos, my excitement never wavered. I was doing it. I was creating something from nothing. I could feel the energy of this project keeping me alive. After months of work, the first batch of speakers finally arrived. I was nervous. What if they didn't work? What if people hated them? But when I tested them, I couldn't help but smile. They were exactly what I'd imagined. I began shipping them out to backers, and to my surprise, The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People loved them. As the months went on, I expanded my product line and began selling my speakers on my website and on Amazon. I reinvested every penny I made into growing the business. I hired a small team, and we began scaling up. We focused on customer service, always responding to inquiries within 24 hours. We created a community around our products, encouraging users to share their experiences online. The brand began to gain traction, but I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to grow faster. I wanted to expand globally. I started looking for investors to help take the business to the next level. It took time, but eventually, I secured funding that allowed us to open new warehouses, hire more staff, and ramp up marketing efforts. The turning point came when we were featured in a major tech magazine. That article brought us millions of new customers and catapulted our brand into the spotlight. We went from being a small startup to a recognized name in tech. Today, my company is a global brand with millions in revenue. We've expanded into other categories, like smart home devices, and we've even started working on artificial intelligence. But none of it would have been possible without that first leap of faith, that tiny Kickstarter campaign that proved my idea was worth something. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. But I still remember those sleepless nights, the doubts, and the relentless grind. There were so many moments when I almost gave up, when it seemed easier to walk away. But I kept pushing forward because I knew that if I didn't try, I would never know how far I could go. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about starting something of their own, I say this: keep going. It won't be easy, but the reward of seeing your dream come to life is worth every obstacle you face. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought my life would end up like this. It all started when I was 23. I had just graduated with a degree in finance, but deep down, I wasn't really interested in working at a corporate job. Sure, I had the grades, the connections, and all the right opportunities laid out for me. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that the traditional 9 to 5 grind just wasn't my path. It felt suffocating, and I couldn't picture myself sitting in an office cubicle for the next 30 years of my life. I had always been drawn to entrepreneurship. Growing up, my parents owned a small family business, a corner store in our neighborhood. I remember running errands for them, watching the ebb and flow of customers, and seeing how their hard work kept everything running smoothly. They weren't wealthy, but they made enough to live comfortably, and there was always something magical about owning your own business and calling the shots. So, in my early 20s, I decided to go down my own path. I spent a lot of time researching business ideas that were both scalable and meaningful. One idea that kept popping up was dropshipping. It was appealing because I didn't need a huge upfront investment, and the business could be run from anywhere with just a laptop. I was excited. With my small savings and a ton of online research, I dove into the world of dropshipping. My first store was a disaster. I launched it with the wrong product, the wrong marketing strategy, and zero understanding of how to effectively reach customers. I spent months running Facebook ads, watching my money burn with little to no return. Each day I felt like I was failing harder than the day before. I even had a moment when I almost threw in the towel. But I told myself, failure is part of the process. Don't give up now. One thing I learned early on was that failure wasn't the end. It was just a lesson. After months of tweaking my strategy, I launched my second store, this time focusing on a niche market, home workout equipment. At the time, people were just beginning to realize how important fitness was, especially since many people had started working out at home due to the pandemic. This time, my research was better, my product selection was better, and my ads were targeted more precisely. For the first month, it felt like nothing was happening. I kept checking my store analytics obsessively, watching the numbers slowly climb. Then, one day, something clicked. My ads started performing better, sales began to trickle in, and I started to get emails from customers saying how much they loved the products. It was a small win, but a win nonetheless. I remember making my first sale and feeling like I had just won the lottery. I still have a screenshot of that first sale. It was a $35 order, but to me, it meant everything. The next few months were a blur of constant learning, experimentation, and pushing through exhaustion. My first real breakthrough came when I ran a promotion on social media that went viral. A few influencers shared my product, and that gave my store the attention it desperately needed. Sales skyrocketed. What had once been a small trickle of income suddenly became a consistent flow. But success didn't come without its challenges. Customer service was a nightmare. Returns, refunds, and unhappy customers flooded my inbox. I spent countless hours handling complaints, managing inventory, and trying to streamline the process. There were days when I thought about quitting again. I questioned whether the stress and constant pressure were worth it. But instead of backing down, I took action. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer support, and I focused on improving the user experience on my site. By the end of year one, I had scaled the business to the point where I was generating a six-figure income annually. I had a team of 3 people working for me, and my days were filled with managing logistics, product sourcing, and marketing strategies. For the first time in my life, I felt in control of my destiny. I was no longer chained to a desk at some corporate job. I had built something from the ground up. But even with all that success, I was still learning and making mistakes. My second year in business was a roller coaster. One of the biggest lessons I learned during that time was the importance of staying flexible. The market was constantly shifting, and what worked last month wasn't necessarily going to work today. I had to adapt, experiment, and constantly innovate to stay ahead of the curve. There were months where I felt like I was treading water, not knowing if I'd be able to keep up with the ever-changing e-commerce landscape. During this time, I began to feel like I needed something more. The business was successful, but it wasn't enough. I started getting ideas for new ventures, new products, and new ways to scale my brand. But instead of diving headfirst into everything at once, I took a step back and reevaluated my priorities. I realized that what I really wanted was to build a legacy, not just a profitable business. I didn't want to be someone who made a quick buck. I wanted to make an impact. So, I took a risk, one of the biggest risks of my life. I decided to sell my dropshipping business and pivot into creating my own line of high-quality fitness equipment. I knew it was going to be a huge undertaking, but it felt right. I wasn't just selling products anymore. I was selling a lifestyle, a brand that aligned with my values. I spent months researching manufacturers, perfecting product designs, and creating the perfect launch strategy. When the time came to launch my fitness equipment line, I was terrified. I had invested everything I had into this new venture. The marketing campaign was massive, and the pressure to succeed was immense. But the response was overwhelming. My brand quickly gained traction, and sales went through the roof. I had done it. I had taken a massive leap of faith, and it had paid off. Fast forward to today, and my business is stronger than ever. I've expanded into multiple product lines, built a loyal customer base, and am now mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm living a life I once thought was impossible. I work from home, set my own hours, and most importantly, I get to help others achieve their dreams, just like I did. Looking back, the journey was never easy, but it was worth every late night, every failure, and every ounce of effort I put in. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but it's been the most rewarding experience of my life. I learned that the key to success is persistence and adaptability, and above all, believing in yourself even when things seem impossible. So, if you're reading this and wondering whether you should take that leap into entrepreneurship, let me tell you, you're never going to know unless you try. Sure, it's hard. You'll face setbacks, rejections, and moments of doubt. But the road to success is built on resilience. Take that first step and keep moving forward, because if I can do it, so can you. I've always had a bit of a rebellious streak, but I never really considered it a blessing until I was forced to make a choice: follow the path of conventional success or blaze my own trail. This story is about how I went from being a broke 22-year-old living in my parents' basement to building a six-figure online business. It's a journey of failure, persistence, and learning lessons the hard way, lessons that I wish I had known before diving in. I hope it helps someone who's considering starting their own venture. Let's rewind a bit. I was fresh out of college with a degree in marketing. I had no idea what I wanted to do with it, but I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. The job market was tough, and every interview I went to felt like a waste of time. Everyone was looking for experience, and I had none. So, like most people in my position, I decided to start working at a restaurant to make ends meet while I figured out my next move. That was the first real failure moment of my life. I had just spent 4 years of my life studying something I thought I was passionate about, and now I was stuck in a job that had nothing to do with my degree. But here's the thing. When you're broke and stuck, you have to get creative. I didn't want to keep working in a dead-end job forever, so I started looking into ways to make money online. I had heard about people making money through e-commerce, but it seemed too good to be true. There were so many articles and ads online promising easy money, earn thousands with zero effort. But I quickly learned that nothing in business comes easy, and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably selling you a dream. One day, while scrolling through Reddit, I stumbled upon a post about dropshipping. If you don't know what dropshipping is, it's a business model where you sell products through an online store, but instead of holding inventory, you rely on third-party suppliers to ship the products directly to your customers. The idea of not needing to handle the products myself seemed like the perfect solution. I wouldn't have to worry about stocking items or shipping anything out. I could focus on marketing, which was what I studied in college. I immediately dove into the world of dropshipping. I spent hours watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and joining Facebook groups. The more I learned, the more excited I became. It seemed like anyone could do it with enough time and effort. I decided to go all in and set up my own store on Shopify. I had no clue what I was doing, but I figured I'd learn as I went. The first couple of months were brutal. I spent money on Facebook ads and influencer marketing campaigns, but my store didn't generate a single sale. It was incredibly frustrating. I remember feeling like I had made a huge mistake. My savings were dwindling, and I was starting to feel the pressure. That's when I had my first wake-up call. My approach wasn't working because I hadn't found a niche that resonated with people. I went back to the drawing board and spent more time researching. That's when I discovered the power of identifying a niche market. I needed a product that wasn't just another generic item that millions of other stores were selling. I needed something specific that a passionate group of people would want. I found my niche in the pet industry. More specifically, I focused on high-quality, durable pet toys for dogs. It was a niche with a strong community of pet owners who were willing to spend money on their pets. I started to test different products, refine my ad strategies, and build an email list. Slowly but surely, I started to see sales trickle in. It wasn't a flood of cash overnight, but it was progress. The moment I made my first sale, I was hooked. It felt like proof that this whole online business thing could actually work. I worked day and night to optimize my website and create content that spoke directly to pet owners. I focused on providing value to my customers instead of just selling to them. Over time, the sales started to increase. By the end of my first year, I had made enough money to quit my restaurant job. I was finally free, and it felt incredible. But I quickly realized that running a business wasn't as easy as it seemed. I had to handle customer service, manage suppliers, track inventory, and keep up with marketing. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, but I kept pushing forward because I knew that success wasn't going to come without hard work. Fast forward to today, and my dropshipping business has grown into a full-fledged online store with a steady stream of revenue. I've been able to hire a small team to help with customer service, product sourcing, and marketing. I'm no longer working 16-hour days like I did in the beginning, but I still put in a lot of effort to keep everything running smoothly. The biggest lesson I've learned is that success is all about consistency. There's no shortcut, no get-rich-quick formula. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when things aren't going well. If there's one thing I wish someone had told me before I started, it's that failure is part of the journey. I failed countless times on products, marketing strategies, and even suppliers. But every failure was a lesson that helped me grow and improve. If you're thinking about starting a business, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is an opportunity to learn, adapt, and get better. I've also learned the importance of personal growth. Running a business forces you to face your weaknesses, whether it's time management, communication, or leadership. I've had to work on developing skills that I never thought I'd need, but it's made me a better entrepreneur and a better person. I know that not everyone wants to start their own business, but if you do, I encourage you to take the leap. Don't be discouraged by the obstacles or the failures along the way. It's going to be hard, but if you're willing to put in the work, it's also going to be worth it. The freedom, the fulfillment, and the financial rewards are real, but they come with a price. Are you ready to pay it? Now, as I look back, I'm grateful for the struggle. I'm grateful for the late nights, the failures, and the countless hours spent learning new things. If I hadn't gone through that rough patch, I wouldn't be where I am today. So if you're out there and you're considering making a change, whether it's starting a business, switching careers, or pursuing a dream, don't wait. Start now. The only thing holding you back is you. Take that first step, and you'll figure out the rest along the way. I was never the kind of kid who dreamed of becoming a billionaire or owning a massive company. Growing up, my idea of success was simple. I just wanted to live a life where I didn't have to worry about money. I didn't even really understand what entrepreneurship was until I found myself in the middle of it all, barely scraping by and wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. It all started when I dropped out of college. I was 20 years old, frustrated with the system, and tired of following a path that didn't feel right. I'd been studying business because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Everyone told me it was a good choice, an easy route into a stable job. But after 2 years, I realized that I wasn't learning anything that excited me. The classes felt like they were just preparing me to get a job at some big company, and I wasn't even sure that was the life I wanted. So, I made the decision to leave school and start my own business. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a rich family or any connections in the business world. I just had an idea that I thought could work, a mobile app that helped people discover local small businesses. It seemed simple enough, something that would make it easier for people to find mom-and-pop shops in their area instead of relying on giant corporations. The first year was brutal. I was living in a cheap apartment, eating ramen every night, and spending all my time coding the app by myself. I had no investors, no team, just me, my laptop, and a dream. Every day felt like a grind, and I'd often question myself, wondering if I was doing something completely foolish. But I kept pushing through. I reached out to local businesses to get them on board, offering them free listings in exchange for their feedback. I worked on the app every single day, tweaking it, fixing bugs, and adding new features. I didn't even think about marketing at first. I just focused on making sure the app worked and that I could get enough users to prove it was worth something. But after a few months, I started to see a pattern. The app was slowly gaining users, but the businesses I'd reached out to were dropping off. They didn't see the value in it. They didn't understand what I was trying to do. That's when I realized something important. I had been so focused on the app itself that I hadn't thought about the user experience from the business owner's perspective. I wasn't solving their problem. I was creating another marketing tool for them to manage, and they were too busy to care about it. I needed to rethink my approach. Instead of just offering them a free listing, I decided to turn the app into a platform where small businesses could advertise directly to users. I created a simple dashboard where businesses could upload promotions, track their performance, and even set up their own ads. It wasn't just about listing their information. It was about giving them real value in terms of customer engagement and sales. This change made a huge difference. Once I restructured the app, business owners started to take notice. They began signing up, and the user base started to grow. But I was still struggling to make ends meet. I had no money for ads, no fancy office, just me and a few part-time developers working remotely. Then, something unexpected happened. I got an email from a venture capital firm. At first, I thought it was spam. But after some research, I realized they were legitimate. They saw the potential in the app and wanted to set up a meeting. I remember feeling both excited and terrified. I had no experience with investors, and the thought of pitching my idea to professionals was overwhelming. But the meeting went well. They liked my vision and saw the market fit for small businesses. They offered me a small seed investment to help scale the business. With the funding, I was able to hire more developers, bring on a marketing team, and start building partnerships with larger companies that would allow us to expand even faster. Things were finally starting to look up. Over the next year, the app gained traction. We expanded to new cities, onboard thousands of small businesses, and our user base grew into the tens of thousands. I was still the CEO, but now I had a team, investors, and a growing company to manage. There were new challenges every day, marketing campaigns, customer support, scaling the infrastructure, but I was learning, and I was passionate about what we were building. However, the real breakthrough came when we partnered with a nationwide retail chain. It was a deal that put us on the map. The chain saw the value in our platform, not just as a tool for small businesses, but as a way for them to reach an entirely new audience. This partnership gave us the exposure we needed and brought in more revenue than we'd seen in the entire previous year combined. That deal changed everything. We were no longer a small startup struggling to survive. We were a growing tech company with a strong foothold in the market. Investors took us more seriously, and we started attracting bigger customers. The pressure increased, but so did the rewards. We were now hiring full-time employees, moving into a bigger office, and seeing our platform grow beyond what I ever thought was possible. By the time I was 28, we had reached over 1 million active users, and the company was valued at over $100 million. Looking back, it felt surreal. I'd gone from coding in my tiny apartment to leading a successful business that was making an impact on small businesses across the country. But the journey wasn't without its setbacks. Along the way, I had to deal with several failed product launches, unhappy customers, and difficult decisions about whether to take the company in a new direction or stick with what was working. There were times I doubted myself and questioned whether I could handle the pressure. But each time, I remembered why I started this business in the first place, to help small businesses grow and succeed. Now, at 30, I've stepped down as CEO and moved into a more advisory role. The company continues to thrive, and I'm proud of what we've built. I'm still involved, but I've learned that sometimes the best thing an entrepreneur can do is step back and allow others to take the reins. Leadership isn't just about running a company. It's about empowering others to lead, too. Looking back on my journey, I realize how much I've changed. I'm not the same person I was when I started. I've learned to take risks, embrace failure, and keep pushing forward no matter how hard things get. It hasn't been easy, but every step has been worth it. I'm not a billionaire, and I'm not sure I'll ever be. But I've built something meaningful, something that has made a real difference in the world. And honestly, that's more than I ever thought I'd achieve. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.